very good evening to you. We sure hope that you are keeping well. Welcome to Channel 1 Business Insight. My name is Betty Kiptum. Now, to dissolve or not to dissolve the Parliament, there is a bit of reprieve on that end as the High Court today blocked the dissolution of Parliament. The details of that story, as well as why small and micro businesses are feeling that government recovery efforts are not reaching them. But first, here are the highlights. Parliament's temporary reprieve. High Court blocks President Uhuru Kenyatta from dissolving Parliament. Green light to defend the borders. Pass-out parade for KDF officers held with calls for soldiers to fight terrorism. And monies to the counties. National Assembly approved the third basis sharing revenue formula, clearing the way for dispatch of funds to counties. Welcome to the bulletin. Lensa Odingo is my sign language interpretation colleague, and I'm Betty Kiptum. Now, the High Court has temporarily blocked President Uhuru Kenyatta from dissolving Parliament for failing to implement the 2/3 gender law. High Court Judge Weldon Korir, issuing conservatory orders, also directed the Chief Justice to appoint a 3-judge bench to interpret and harmonize Article 261 of the Constitution on the procedure for dissolution of Parliament. The ruling came barely hours after the Law Society of Kenya threatened to mobilize Kenyans to occupy Parliament on the 12th of October if the President failed to dissolve it. Kevin Washira with the details.
Parliament can temporarily breathe easy after the High Court blocked President Uhuru Kenyatta from implementing an advisory opinion by the Chief Justice to dissolve Parliament for failing to implement the 2/3 gender law. The High Court issued conservatory orders pending the determination of a petition filed by Leina Conchela and Mohsen Abdul Munsa on Wednesday. The duo queried the procedure of implementing Article 261(7) of the Constitution, which they argued was vague and did not outline the procedure for the dissolution of Parliament. In his ruling, Judge Weldon Korir pointed out the issues raised by the petitioners were weighty and required constitutional interpretation. He also directed the Chief Justice to appoint a 3-judge bench to hear the matter on the 7th October 2020. Parties in the case were also ordered to file their submission by Monday. Earlier, the Law Society of Kenya, through its chair Nelson Harvey, had threatened to occupy Parliament on 12th of October if the President failed to dissolve Parliament.
The urgency and finality is necessitated by an emerging and fast developing trend by certain individuals and institutions to belittle, berate, and castigate the Chief Justice for having advised the dissolution of Parliament as mandated by the Constitution of Kenya. Key amongst the individuals propagating the false, erroneous narrative is the Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Justin Muturi, who, unfortunately, is an advocate and ought to have handled the matter with wisdom and leadership.
LSK had written to the National Treasury to withhold MPs' salaries and asked the Ministry of Interior to withdraw police officers assigned to parliamentarians from 12th of October. Wiper Party leader Kalonzo Musyoka had also queried the pronouncement by the Chief Justice, which wasn't issued from the bench.
The fact that the learned Chief Justice did not deal with this matter in an open court where he could have been moved along with maybe 2 other judges of the Supreme Court and therefore be able to issue an advisory. My own position, even as an officer of the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeal and, an officer of the High Court, being a senior counsel, is that advisory needs serious interrogation.
Kevin Washira, Channel 1 News.
Now, President Uhuru Kenyatta has challenged the Kenya Defence Forces to remain steadfast in protecting the country from domestic and foreign terror activities. The head of state who presided over the Kenya Defence Forces pass-out parade in Eldoret said Kenya's position at the United Nations Security Council has been aided by the country's heavy investment in security and training of Kenya's servicemen and women.
Donned in Kenya's national colors and the blue face mask that has become part of the new normal. Thousands of young servicemen and women on Thursday took an oath to guard and defend Kenya's territorial borders. Unlike the previous years, the annual event was closed to the public due to the coronavirus pandemic. President Uhuru Kenyatta highlighting the enormous contribution played by the Kenya Defence Forces in protecting the territory from insurgency.
Let me at this point note with appreciation the role that the Kenya Defence Forces has also played and continues to play in regional security stabilization, specifically, as I stated earlier, in the war against terror. While we have made good progress, it is important to note that we still have security challenges that require our attention, and I do believe that you are the right people for that job.
The push to have meaningful representation of women in appointive and elective positions appearing to gain traction in the military, with more women signing up for national duty this year.
This is your ultimate contribution to the people of Kenya, who by accepting to pay tax have sacrificed to ensure you successfully discharge your duties, and I urge you to apply yourselves in the most patriotic and professional manner at all times.
President Kenyatta challenging the youth to be purpose-driven, saying the success of national development goals highly depended on Kenya's young population.
Our success on national development goals that we have set for ourselves as a people depends on you, our young people. However, you must be purpose-driven. If you become a community of solution givers and problem solvers, success will inevitably follow you.
Indeed, a hearty congratulations to all those officers. Now, the National Assembly has adopted the third basis for revenue sharing report tabled from the Senate, paving way for disbursement of funds to counties. During the debate on the motion, members of the National Assembly faulted the Senate over delay in passage of revenue formula, claiming the move had jeopardized county operations. This, as the National Assembly Justice and Legal Affairs Committee approved the nomination of Anne Nderitu as the Registrar of Political Parties.
A report on the third basis for revenue sharing that brought to an end the stalemate over the revenue formula has been tabled and adopted at the National Assembly, paving way for the Treasury to disburse monies to counties. During the debate, MPs faulted the Senate for taking time to pass the formula, yet 90% of the formula are proposals by the Commission for Revenue Allocation.
Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. As many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
The MPs accused senators of purporting to protect devolution, yet its oversight on the same was questionable.
And moving forward, we are hoping that this will never ever happen again. And the intervention by the Budget Committee and this House should give precedence that we cannot be held hostage by the Senate of the Republic of Kenya.
Therefore, I feel like the Senate or the CRA needs to go deeper and identify more other parameters that are instrumental in sharing these resources, so that we have a situation where economic activities such as fishing, which is substantially contributing to agriculture, form a basis for revenue sharing.
The Budget and Appropriations Committee has further recommended that the Senate relooks into the formula and comes up with a scientific one.
Also hoping that they are going to fast-track the CARA so that by next week we are able to also pass that, but with that caution that by next year, Mr. Speaker, the Senate will revisit this issue and give the country a scientific formula.
And the National Assembly Justice and Legal Affairs Committee has in the meanwhile approved the nomination of Andy Ritu as the Registrar of Political Parties. However, the committee rejected the approval of nomination of Wilson Makore as the Assistant Registrar. Ali Abdullahi Suro and Florence Tabu were also cleared to serve as the Assistant Registrars.
You require Andy Ritu to deal with all these things. And Mr. Speaker, many others, including people who claim that parties have made a decision without calling party organ meetings. So, Mr. Speaker, this is not an easy job. And I think Andy Ritu, I've interacted a lot with her. Even apart from handling and managing those issues, even the issues of helping parties promote financial management in terms of looking at our budget estimate. Those who have not been involved very closely in managing political party affairs may not have this information. I want to say here categorically that I think the President got the right person. In fact, this lady, I was wondering why she has been acting for far this long.
Ritu has really worked well at the office of the Registrar of Political Parties. Mr. Speaker, it is such a wonder why, Mr. Speaker, with such a huge responsibility that is the office of the Registrar of Political Parties, that one works there in an acting capacity.
Mohochi does not qualify in terms of statutory provisions as it is today, Honorable Speaker. Therefore, it will be important, Honorable Speaker, that this House votes not to approve the name of Mr. Mohochi because he did not qualify in terms of the ethics. We cannot really verify because the DCI is also not sure of this person.
The two assistant registrars come from very humble counties, the county of Kilifi and the county of Mandera. And this has really given that despite Kilifi and Mandera being marginalized, we can be able to produce learned people like Surau and Florence and myself as well. And having said that, I wish to support the report.
For Channel 1 News, I'm Gladys Mungai.
Deputy President William Ruto has urged political leaders to shun tribalism and instead focus on how to empower Kenyans. Speaking in Kajiado County, Ruto also spoke against what he termed as threats meant to intimidate his supporters. Ruto was accompanied by a section of Jubilee MPs who raised a red flag over what they term as a scheme to manipulate data through Huduma number for political reasons.
Bwana Yesu asifiwe. Hebu mnisalimia hewani hivi nione Bwana Yesu asifiwe.
The Deputy President William Ruto was in Kajiado County to attend the Olngesher Lol Ilmeshirie ceremony of the Matapato clan of the Maasai community. Ruto was accompanied by over 40 Jubilee MPs who used the opportunity to express their reservations over the planned Phase 2 Huduma number registration exercise, claiming that there is a scheme to manipulate data through Huduma number for political reasons.
Hamuwezi tuibia pesa ya corona tena mtupangie mtembee na watoto na ng'ombe na kondoo na mbuzi zetu ati tuweke kwa card iende na mzungu ati alafu utupangie ati utaiba kura ya mahasla na Huduma namba.
The MP is also claiming that the exercise will provide a loophole for public funds to be lost through corruption.
Tumeona wameanza ukora kama ile walileta wakiongea maneno ya corona. Mukaona chai inakunywa ya milioni 4 maneno ya corona. Nyinyi mlinunuliwa mask sama kupewa PPE za anything huko.
Hao wazungu wamekuja hapa kujipanga, kuiba pesa na kuiba kura. Sisi wenyewe na Wamasai tutachukua rungu tuwarudishe kwao. Kwa hivyo hawa majamaa wanaotaka kuleta hizi stories za Huduma namba, hawa ni jamaa ambao wameshikana na international criminals na wao wenyewe hapa tunawajua biashara zao. Kwa hivyo sisi si wajinga, tunakataa hizo stories za Huduma namba. Kwanza tunadai Huduma namba ile tumeandikisha kwanza. Nyinyi mulipata?
The Deputy President taking the chance to strongly condemn what he termed as plots to threaten and intimidate his supporters.
Sisi tunawaambia hiyo system yenu na hiyo deep state yenu na hiyo mambo yenu ya magodfather
sisi tutakutana na nyinyi kama wananchi wa Kenya na God the Father. Ati watu wanakuja kutisha wa Kenya. Mimi nataka niwaambie hawa marafiki, wacheni vitisho, wacheni madharau, wacheni kiburi.
Eric kuja hapa.
Meanwhile, COTU Secretary General Francis Atwoli has hit out at the Deputy President over his hustler mantra, challenging him to focus on elevating the poor in the society.
Why do you want to be associated with such a name? Why? Why do you want to be associated with such a name? We want a structured life. Ukipeleka mtoto yako kwa shule, atoke kwa shule, apate kazi mzuri, afunge tai kama wengine, ajifunze kubeba kamera kama ina, alipwe mshahara mzuri, awe na gari yake kama mtu alienda kwa shule. You can't say we are going to form a government of gamblers. A government of hustlers. Tutatengeneza serikali yetu.
And in Kiambu County, a group of concerned residents have dismissed as self-seeking the meetings that Mount Kenya politicians have started holding to discuss the region's development.
Hakuna haja ya kushinda tukidanganyana. Huo mkutano wanajitayarisha kwa sababu ya vio ambavyo wanatarajia kupata katika serikali inayokuja. Lakini haukuwa mkutano ambao unajadilia shida na matakwa ya watu wa Mlima Kenya.
Kwanza wakae chini, wafikirie mambo ya watoto vile watarudi kwa shule, na hiyo shule vile itakuwa ikisomwa, na hii mambo ya hii masks vile watoto watakuwa wakiitumia sababu kuko na shida.
On Friday last week, politicians from the vast region held a 6-hour meeting at Thika Gardens to discuss what a section of them termed as development of the region. For Channel 1 News, I'm Safin Aching Oma.
Now to the latest on the COVID-19 pandemic. The Ministry of Health has rolled out behavior change communication in communities in a bid to ensure that the containment measures rolled out to prevent the spread of coronavirus are being adhered to. This comes as the country recorded 141 positive cases from a sample size of 3,307 in the last 24 hours. Emily Kay with the details.
In the latest development, the Ministry of Health has rolled out a program to directly engage with communities through their leaders.
Today really marks a change in approach when it comes to the COVID-19 response, where we are rolling out what is known as behavior change communication. We've just concluded a 2-hour session with the community. We met with the leaders of the Boda Boda Association. We've met with the Matatu Association. We've met with the community health workers. We've also met with the youth. And we've deliberated on what it means in terms of adherence of the COVID-19 protocols.
Communities will deliberate on adherence to protocols following numerous cases of people ignoring the laid down protocols.
We have noted, however, generally as a country over the last couple of weeks that many people have started to ignore the laid down protocols for dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic.
Health Chief Administrative Secretary Mercy Mwangangi is warning the recent reduction in the numbers of infection doesn't mean the country is completely out of the woods.
And so we remind you that there is no cure for this disease. And yes, studies are being carried out the world over to be able to determine if we can find a cure, and also to be able to find a vaccine that can offer us, a new way of living while controlling this pandemic. But the important message becomes that really, this condition is still here with us. While gains have been made, we have to ensure that we avoid going back, we avoid getting a second wave.
Mwangangi, who was speaking at Thika Level 5 Hospital after a community engagement with the leaders and members of Kiambu County, said that 141 people tested positive for the virus out of 3,307 samples tested, increasing the total coronavirus burden to 37,489. In what appears to be a new trend, Trans Nzoia led with 28 cases, followed by Nakuru, which had 24 cases. Nairobi and Mombasa both had 14, Kiambu 9, Turkana 4, Bungoma, Homa Bay, West Pokot, Machakos 2 each, while Murang'a, Nandi, Vihiga, Meru and Busia had 1 case each. The number of recoveries rose to 24,334 after 81 patients were discharged, out of which 69 were from home-based care program and 12 from various health facilities. The number of fatalities also increased to 669 after 5 people succumbed to the virus. For Channel 1 News, I am Emily K. Bade.
You are watching Channel 1 Business Insight, and on Facebook, Enos Omodi, you say you're watching from Nairobi. Wanyanga Jr., that's Victor, you say you are watching with your brother Caleb and in-law Gertrude in Bungoma. Anthony Kyoko watching from Ruiru. Thank you very much for interacting with us. Remember, we are at KBC Channel 1 News on Facebook and at KBC Channel 1 on Twitter. We will be right back with more news.
When the world changed, it made us go back to the simple joys and love the little things even more, like serving up your best, eating together, and sharing more. Now, we'll take nothing for granted and always remember to taste the simple joys. Coca-Cola, taste the simple joys.
On the next episode of Corner.
You look down.
There's no need to bother you.
If it's something about your past, I might not be able to help. But you could give it a try. I have to go in.
Wewe umeamua utajiachilia hivyo mpaka ukauke kama rangi kwa ukuta.
I wish this gym never existed. All it brings is misery to my family.
Welcome back. Now, the Judiciary has implemented sweeping changes that will see 42 judges transferred and redeployed to new divisions effective immediately. Separately, businesswoman Joyce Akinyi has been barred by the Assets Recovery Agency from selling, transferring or disposing two vehicles and ordered to surrender the vehicles within 7 days.
In the latest changes at the Judiciary, 42 judges of the High Court have been redeployed with the transfers of 13 judges backdated to the 15th of September. Among those whose transfers have been backdated include 3 environment judges. 21 other judge transfers take effect immediately. 8 judges in the Employment and Labor Relations Court are listed for transfer from 1st of November. Some of the judges have been redeployed to new divisions. Among the judges who will be changing stations include Lady Justice Roslyn Korir, Justice James Wakiaga, Justice John Mativo, Justice Charles Kariuki, Justice Chacha Mwita, and Justice Roslyn Wendo. In the Employment and Labor Relations, Justice Matthew Sinduma, Lady Justice Monica Mbaru, Justice Onesmus Macau, Lady Justice Helen Wasilwa, Justice James Rika, Justice Stephen Radido, Justice Byron Mungaya, Justice Nzioka wa Macau. Meanwhile, the Assets Recovery Agency has barred businesswoman Joyce Akinyi from selling, transferring or disposing two vehicles. Akinyi is to surrender the original logbooks and the vehicles to the DCI in 1 week. The National Transport Safety Authority has also been ordered to register caveat against the records of each of the vehicles. The Assets Recovery Agency argues that the assets may have been proceeds of crime and money laundering. According to investigations, deposits were made in tranches below 100,000 shillings to evade the reporting thresholds by the Central Bank of Kenya. Earlier on, Akinyi had been arrested in 2019 and arraigned over charges of trafficking narcotic drugs after investigations established that there were massive suspicious cash deposits. For Channel 1 News, I'm Serafina Robbie.
Now to River Tana, where more than 1,000 different fish species have died in one of the biggest environmental catastrophes to hit the River Tana. The development follows the blocking of salty water intrusion from the 6-kilometer Matomba Brook into the River Tana by locals. A visit to Chara village in Tana Delta revealed an incident that has left tons of fish dead along the river. Tana River is the lifeline of much of Tana Delta's agriculture industry and supports thousands of communities through Garsen, Kilelengwani, Shirikisho and Chara.
But one of the things that
they failed to do is to understand exactly at what point that closure was supposed to happen, so that all the fish that are basically freshwater fish, the catfish, that were all, and many other biodiversity that we still do not know exactly now, that were all within the brackish environment, have all been closed. And so because of that salinity of the waters, all the fish have died.
Now to the counties, 3 non-locals have been reported missing after they were allegedly kidnapped by suspected Al-Shabaab militia Wednesday evening. The 3 were in a bus that had left Mandera town on its way to Lafay when it was stopped by suspected Al-Shabaab along the remote area between Fino and Sheikh Barrow.
The suspected Al-Shabaab militia allegedly separated the locals from non-locals who were all in the bus before ordering the locals to get into the bus and proceed with their journey. The gang then fled on foot towards Somalia with the 3 men. A contingent of security officers has been deployed to track down militants. Confirming the incident, Mandera County Commissioner Onesmus Kiatha said the whereabouts of the 3 is yet to be established.
Sahi bado hatujaweza kuthibitisha kama wamewapata, lakini polisi na vitengo zile zingine zote za serikali wanaendelea kufuatilia hilo jambo. Ni jambo la kusikitisha sana kwa sababu sisi katika kaunti yetu tumeweka mikakati ya kuhakikisha zile mabasi ambazo zinatoka katika kaunti yetu kusafirisha wale ambao wanaitwa non-locals kwamba siko katika zinakuanga na under police escort. Lakini jana hatuelewi kuanzia saa 6 mpaka saa 10 hao watu waliamua kwenda upande ule kwa karibu na mpaka yetu na Somalia Haji. Ni jambo ambalo mpaka saa hii sisi tunajaribu, inaendelea kuchunguzwa.
Meanwhile, 5 residents from Nyandarua County have filed a petition at the Nyahururu High Court petitioning Interior Cabinet Secretary Fred Matiang'i to revoke a gazette notice gazetting Shamata Township as designated headquarters for the newly created Aberdare sub-county. On July 3, 2020, a gazette notice 4571 established 2 sub-counties in Nyandarua County, namely Aberdare and Gadhanje, as service delivery coordination units to enhance services.
Even a headquarter here, na tumesign visitors book. Sasa ni nini nyingine ilikuwa inatakikana kama sio kuweka sahihi hapa?
Elsewhere, the Muslim community in Migori County has filed a petition to Migori County Commissioner's Office decrying discrimination during the issuance of national identification cards.
I completed my primary education here in Migori and I did my KCSE last year. I am planning to join Masinde Muliro University, but I don't have ID. I applied for my ID several times. I have been denied because
shida ile ambayo iko hawezi elezwa. Na mbeleni tunapata saa hii na koma. Shida iko wapi kama sina uliza asemi na si mimi sina huyu na huyu na huyu.
In the meantime, over 16,000 residents of Morangi County are set to benefit from a 7 million shilling borehole at Mjini Primary School that will serve the school and the community. The water kiosk will also provide free water to people living in these lands. At the same time, residents will benefit from a 150,000 shillings project that will see water drawn from a spring channeled into several taps into various homesteads, thus addressing water shortage in the area. And in effort to address poor handling or late response of individuals involved in accidents, the government, in partnership with various stakeholders, has moved into constructing 2 response units between Mombasa and Malaba to provide emergency medical services.
The facility that we are launching here is very, very well equipped to support accidents when they do happen. Nursing hand will be the first point of call to be able to get to site. They have very nicely kitted equipment that even can cut a metal to support the patient involved in the accident to get safely to hospital for better medical care. So this is the first one that we have.
Finally, Siaya County Police Commander Francis Kooli has called on law enforcement officers to embrace integrity and focus on effective service delivery to climb the career ladder in the National Police Service. Kooli said that the National Police Service was now going for the best officers to head various cadres in the service, hence the need for all officers to up their game. He was addressing officers of various ranks who were scheduled to appear before the county selection board for promotion interviews.
Who are there, who have qualified, the senior in ranks, those who have done examinations have qualified, because there is that weekly order that has details on how people have performed for the last 5 years. So they base on many parameters, not only in terms of the strength we have in each county.
Reporting for Channel 1 News, I'm Jackie Wambiru.
Now, further afield, the United Arab Emirates will resume issuing entry permits on Thursday, but the issuance of new work visas will remain suspended. This comes as more than 32 million people around the world have been diagnosed with the coronavirus, and over 982,000 have died, according to Johns Hopkins University. Some 23 million people have recovered.
The United Arab Emirates will resume issuing entry permits Thursday, but the issuance of new work visas will remain suspended. That is according to the official Emirates news agency WAM. This comes as Saudi Arabia announced that it will allow pilgrims living inside the country to undertake their Umrah pilgrimage beginning October 4th after a 7-month pause due to the coronavirus pandemic, state news agency Saudi Press Agency has reported. Meanwhile, the United Kingdom government has launched a contact tracing app for smartphones, which it says will help control the spread of coronavirus. The app will be available for download for people over 16 in England and Wales. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi called for a reduction in local lockdowns in order to help the wider economy during an online meeting with state leaders on Wednesday. Local police in the city of Mumbai announced a partial lockdown last week, with movement in containment zones, sections of the city identified as coronavirus hotspots prohibited except for essential activities. Israel's cabinet has agreed to a tightening of its second national lockdown in a bid to stem a steep rise in cases. China reported 7 new COVID-19 cases on Wednesday, down from 10 the day before, the country's National Health Authority said on Thursday.
Jumapili hii kwenye runinga ya KBC, ungana naye Askofu Michael Wanderi wa kanisa la Christian Foundation Fellowship Kiambu kuanzia saa 1 hadi saa 2 asubuhi.
Ningetaka nikwambie, our Jehovah God, because the Bible says he is the same yesterday, today and forevermore. He is able to take you to a place of abundance. He is able to take you to Rehoboth in the name of Jesus Christ.
Kipindi ni neno la neema, ukiletewa naye Askofu Michael Wanderi wa kanisa la Christian Foundation Fellowship Kiambu. Usikose.
Next on.
So you're still working for Nancy? Who, your mother? Do we know any other Nancy? Well, I'd never work with that selfish woman.
Could you please just concentrate for 1 second and put down your phone?
Yo, listen. I'm trying my best here. I'm tired. Of what?
Being used, apparently.
How much did she promise you?
Lakini huku ni kwa dosi kuruka.
Usilete hizo tabia zako za ghetto mtaa.
Welcome back. You are watching Business Insight. Let's now do the business. Kenya Power is optimistic that the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority would consider its proposal to increase electricity tariffs to cover higher costs of maintenance of the national grid. The utility firm applied for electricity tariffs review last year in proposals that could see the cost of electricity increasing by 20% if endorsed by the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority.
Kenya Power had applied to the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority to consider increasing power tariffs in the country to cover costly wholesale electricity purchases and maintenance of the national grid. In its submissions, the utility firm says the current power tariffs that had been ordered by the government had lapsed. Kenya Power is optimistic that its proposal for a hike of electricity tariffs by 20% could be approved by the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority.
As regards the tariff application which we made, yes, we did that as required of us, and IPRA, who are the regulator, they are looking at it. They have not responded yet. We're still waiting.
He further said electricity consumption in the country has started to pick up pre-COVID-19 levels as the economy opened up after measures to curb the spread of the coronavirus were relaxed.
We have started recovering. We are actually very close, perhaps 1% less of where we were in February.
KPLC is optimistic that the government stimulus packages to struggling businesses will further drive up the demand.
A little bit over the capacities that we're a little bit above the demand. But we do know we're making a lot of developments. This is one of them. SGS is another one. The line to Bavoko City and cities are coming up.
Benson Roba reporting for Channel 1 Business.
Now, the informal sector players have called on the government to ensure that opportunities fronted to micro, small and medium enterprises trickle down to the targeted group. An informal sector coalition says most economic recovery efforts targeting the sector are taken up by medium enterprises, locking out the small and micro businesses which form the majority of MSMEs. Lessened duration of operation, low demand and cash flow problems led some small businesses to close shop or reduce their operations. Micro and small businesses took the hardest hit when COVID-19 restrictions were imposed. The government came up with measures to increase the chances of survival for businesses, especially the MSME sector, which employs about 80% of the working population. Players say businesses are only beginning their recovery journey. The small and micro enterprises are, however, not amused with the distribution of government recovery opportunities for the sector.
During this difficult time, it is important that jobs are preserved, business remains sustainable, affected workers and their families are well protected, particularly the most vulnerable and those in the informal economy.
We've taken our samples to chamber. We've taken our samples 2 times. We needed to be recognized, and if they don't meet the standards, as the chair said, they should come and train us so that at least tupate hiyo nafasi. Hii kazi yetu isiende mahali kwingine, sababu kama sector tumepigika sana.
The informal sector players are calling for support through reforms and policies, saying the sector has potential to address unemployment in the country.
We call upon the national and county governments, senators, MPs, MCAs, and the private sector, and well-wishers to advocate and encourage support for the MSE sector to continue to support the base of the economy and help in job retention during this difficult time, where majority of small businesses have closed or are facing closure.
The association is made up of Juakali artisans, hawkers, boda-boda operators, mama mbogas, and youth entrepreneurs. Betty Kiptum, Channel 1 Business. Now to magical scenes. Mugumo is a sacred tree among the Agikuyu community. The Agikuyu would conduct prayers under the Mugumo tree. Tonight on Magical Scenes, Irene Muchuma Odem features the Mugumo tree.
Mugumo is the name of a special, gigantic sacred tree known to the Kikuyu community and many others in Kenya. This is where the Agikuyu would conduct prayers and cleansing ceremonies. Historians believe this is where Mugo, a Kikuyu prophet, predicted the coming of white settlers to Kenya. The British are said to have protected a Mugumo tree in Kiambu from falling because they feared if the tree fell, a bad omen would befall the community. And as they say, every beginning has an end. A more than 200-year-old Mugumo tree in Githunguri fell, and cleansing ceremony had to be conducted before the removal of the trunk to any other location.
Hii mti inaitwa Mugumo ndio ilikuwa mti ya Wakikuyu ya kuombea Mungu, ya kufanyia masherehe yote ya Mkikuyu. Kwa hivyo hii mti ilianguka yenyewe. Ikaanguka, upepo ukakuja ikaanguka. Kwa hivyo hakuna mtu angefaa kugusa hii mti kabla ya kutoa hii sherehe tumetoa leo. Hii sherehe ni ya kusema hii mtu anaweza kukata kuni hapa, sababu hapo beleni hangekata kabla hatujafanya hii sherehe.
Some natives believe that going around a Mugumo tree 7 times would automatically change one's sex. Others believe spirits of the ancestors and the living dead hover around this tree. Mugumo tree was used as a tomb for ancient heroes.
Na watu wengi wale hawajui mambo ya hii mti, waache kuongea mambo mingi, wakuje kwa wasee. Ndio kwamba waelezwe maana ya hii mti ni nini. Sababu hii ni nyumba ya Mungu. Hata zamani tukiwa wadogo tulikuwa tunaambiwa na mababu zetu na baba zetu ati hii mti ukicheza nayo, ukizunguka mara 7 utabadilika na uwe msichana. Kwa hivyo hatukuwa tunacheza nayo. Kwa hii mti ni mtu wa Mungu kweli.
Irene Huchuma Odim, Medical Sense in the county of Kiambu.
Now, Kenya Power has started relocating power lines along the JKIA Westlands Expressway in Nairobi underground in a project expected to cost 1.08 billion shillings. Chairman Mahbub Maalim is pledging minimal electricity interruption during the 2-month process.
As construction of the JKIA Westlands Expressway starts in earnest, Kenya Power is the latest entity yet to relocate its infrastructure from the highway's path. The utility firm is spending 1.08 billion shillings to relocate electricity infrastructure along the causeway by moving it underground.
It's about 27 kilometers, but in real number of kilometers of lines that have to be relocated because the lines are not static. Every line is connected to another one. Probably for us this is total lines of about nearly 100 kilometers or so that have to be moved or to be touched, even those that are necessarily not on the line but elsewhere, touching with the ones we are moving.
Officials who are promising minimal power interruptions estimate to take 2 months to complete the relocation process.
People who have already set up what we call structures to hold the lines to ensure that customers are on supply. Once we've done that, we move those lines to those structures which we are putting. Then the structures that are on the road, we have to remove them. And where it is a bit difficult to do exactly that, we are using our lifeline equipments.
However, the expressway, which will be the first toll road in the country, continues to draw mixed reactions among members of the public, with some saying the proposed one-way 300 shillings toll fee will be beyond reach for many commuters.
Mtu hana 300 ama anapeleka mgonjwa hospitali na hana hiyo pesa na ako na shida, hawezi pitia hapo. Kwa hivyo itabidi apitie kwa jamu. Hii inakuja kusaidia wale watu wako na pesa, sio mwananchi wa kawaida, hapana.
Barabara ikiisha itasaidia sababu jam itapungua na usafiri itakuwa rahisi.
The expressway is set for completion in 2021 and will cost 62 billion shillings. Benson Rioba reporting for Channel 1 Business.
Well, there was a mix-up in that story of the names. We referred to the chairman as the MD and the MD as the chairman. We duly apologize for that. Now, moving on, following a successful pilot of an egg production project, the county government of Kirinyaga is targeting to scale up the project to produce 3 million eggs monthly in the area. Kirinyaga Governor Anne Waiguru says the project aims at helping Kenya meet egg production deficit of 10 million eggs monthly, as well as economically empower residents. Our reporter Caroline Kamau was in Kirinyaga County and files this report.
In March this year, the county government of Kirinyaga launched a poultry project targeting to produce 1 million eggs monthly in an initiative aimed at economically empowering area residents, as well as bridging the national egg deficit estimated at 10 million eggs per month.
We have given each group 1,250 chicks, and therefore anticipating that they will produce 1,200 eggs a day.
Under the poultry project, 32 community interest groups were offered chicks, and 7 months later, farmers are reaping from the now mature layers.
All through the 6 months, we've had free feeds from the county government. Since they came, that was March 3rd, they were chicks. We've reared them to this point when they are now laying eggs. We've been trained on chicken husbandry, which has been a very successful mission. And every member here is now very well equipped. They can rear chicken even at their home level.
Here in Kagioine in Mukuru Ward, we meet members of the Mukulima Bora group. Titus Minor says the egg project has been a game changer in Kirinyaga.
That training alone I have found is so useful to the farmers, because even when the project money is not there, when the county is not there to assist us, the members will be empowered adequately to rear chicken.
In Nyangate Ward, we are told this project has empowered women better take care of their children and homes.
Wanawake mbele tunakula mayai, tunaokota hii manyua, tunaweka kwa shamba ya mchere, saa fertilizer tuweki nyingi.
We are in time for collection of eggs at the Mwereri group. Once these eggs are collected, they are transported to a cold storage facility for packaging.
We sell it to 280 shillings wholesale per tray, and right now we cannot satisfy the demand because as I talk right now, the eggs behind me have already been booked for tomorrow's sale.
The Kirinyaga Investment Development Authority sells the eggs on behalf of the farmers.
Tumewaleta hawa wakulima wote wale wanalima kuku kwa kikundi moja inaitwa Kirinyaga Poultry Growers Association. Sasa through that poultry cooperative tunakusanya mayai yao yote pamoja, tunayaleta kwa store yetu ile tumejenga Kiaga, na kutoka hapo wale watu wote wanataka kununua mayai wanakuja to that central point. Through the marketing arm, kuna watu wanatusaidia kutafuta soko ya mayai.
Chicken feeds are manufactured at the Kirinyaga Agricultural Center. After piloting the program, the county government, under the stewardship of the Governor Anne Waiguru, plans to scale up the project with the goal of producing 3 million eggs monthly. The Wezesha Kirinyaga Poultry Project has so far benefited 32 community groups, each rearing 1,250 layers. The aim is to replicate this project across Kirinyaga County, making Kirinyaga the hub of egg production in Kenya. Caroline Kamau reporting for Channel 1 News from Kirinyaga County.
Na msibabaishwe na yale mnayoyapitia, hata yawe magumu kiasi gani, yote yatapita. La msingi ni kuweka tumaini letu kwa Mungu aliyetuumba. Katika kitabu cha Warumi 5:3, wala si hivyo tu, ila mnafurahia.
Kupata dhiki huleta zaburi. Bonyeza *811 *963#. Bonyeza *811 *963#.
This weekend on KBC Channel 1.
I want to move in with you.
No, sisi, no way, no way, no way.
Why, baby? I like you, you like me. What else do we need?
Stupidity of the highest order. What kind of a man are you?
Sisi yeye was ndabundili nengalo na fulawa Julia.
You know, Michelle, you keep blaming this man. But you should ask yourself, what drove him to me in the first place?
And of course, we can agree beauty is far from it. Jungle B.
This weekend on KBC Channel 1.
Ash clouds we saw over Iceland, nothing compared to what's going to happen next.
Firefighters are attempting to contain the inferno.
You really need to start evacuating as much as possible. Of Wyoming? Of North America?
Two experts
Tell me what your plan is to stop it.
racing against time
You would need to inject this directly into the magma.
to battle mankind's greatest threat, Earth itself.
All right then, let's do it. Josh, quickly move!
Nobody gets left behind. Gotta get out of here, okay?
The end is just the beginning. Super eruption.
KBC, in collaboration with the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, is broadcasting enhanced out-of-class learning on radio, television, and online. Catch the lessons every weekday on KBC Channel 1 from 2 to 4 p.m., on KBC English Service and 15 FM from 9:15 a.m. to 5 p.m., and Radio Taifa from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. KBC English Service, Radio Taifa, and 15 FM are also available countrywide on the free-to-air Signet digital TV platform, or log on to www.kbc.co.ke for live streaming, or download the KBC Online app on Google Play Store. Kenya Broadcasting Corporation, ensuring learning no matter what.
Welcome back. Now, the manufacturing sector received renewed interest through the Big Four agenda, which seeks to nearly double its GDP contribution to 15% by the year 2022. The shocks of the COVID-19 pandemic, however, undid gains made, resulting in diminished markets, reduced production and job losses. The industrial machines are now slowly reeling back to life. I had a sit-down with Kenya Association of Manufacturers Chair Mushai Kunyiha to discuss the impact on the manufacturing sector as well as the recovery strategy. Here is how the conversation went. Revenue as well as increasing their market share, but when the pandemic struck, they had to go into survival mode, like the whole economy really, and focus on cost reduction as well as job retention. Now, to discuss just how that sector is doing is Mr. Mushai Kunyiha. He is the chairman of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, and he shall be telling us how the sector is doing and what is the way forward and if there is a recovery strategy. Welcome. Well, how is the situation looking?
Well, who knows? It's a very difficult situation at the moment. Obviously, from March, we've seen a lot changing. So when the pandemic first came for the whole world, there was quite a bit of panic. I think we didn't really know what was going to happen next. And there was a lot of worry and concern about the spread of the disease. I think the first thing to say is it was a health crisis.
Right.
So everybody was worried about who's going to get it, are we going to survive, that kind of thing. So that did lead to some really tough decisions and tough times. March, April, and I think part of May were very difficult for manufacturers. But as we've gone on, I think one of the good things, and I was just reading reports, we've had a relatively good we've gone through COVID. We've done well in dealing with the COVID, relatively well, right? I think we've still had loss of life and we've had quite a number of infections. But if you start looking globally and compare to what other countries have experienced and continue to experience, you have to say we're actually very far from our worst case scenario. Whatever we feared worst, it hasn't come to pass. And I think that's a good thing. So we need to commend government also and Kenyans for the actions that we took, because I think they participated in making sure that we didn't have too bad a first round of the pandemic. Now the challenge is that we don't know what's going to happen next.
Right, no one knows the future really.
Nobody really knows the future. There's still a lot of uncertainty until perhaps we get a vaccine. And then there's some level of comfort or a treatment. That's the other one they're saying. If we have a clear treatment. That's the hope everybody has. So there was a lot of uncertainty then. Obviously the lockdowns had a big impact on manufacturing. Thankfully, again, with government, we were able to identify essential production, and that was kind of kept free. We could continue manufacturing. We could work overnight. Goods could move within the country even after hours and so on if we had the right permits. Yeah, I think being able to supply the market was an important part of that. Now, having said that, I think it has been difficult also for some of the manufacturers. We did a survey in May and found that actually more than 60-70% of our manufacturers were operating below 50% of their capacity during that period. Just given where all the demand went, the orders, people were not asking for new product. And I think it was especially for those who are not doing non-essential goods that became a big challenge. We had a little bit of a challenge with exports as well, people who were exporting to the region. If you remember at the beginning, there were problems at the borders around the COVID test for drivers. How do we get the drivers along? But again, with the help of the Ministry of EAC and Industry, we've been able to smoothen that process. So now it's a little bit smoother. People understand what needs to be done to move goods across borders, etc. So that's opened up a little bit.
Well, how about the exports now that use maybe planes, cargo space? Were they affected?
Yes, I think especially for things that are flown out, this is mostly agro, horticulture, and flowers and floriculture. There was a shortage of flights. So the flights coming in are not enough to take out goods, because what tends to happen is that the passenger flights also take a little bit of cargo. So now when there were no passenger flights, the cargo was just building up. There was too much cargo, and the ones who came, now the prices shot up significantly, and that was a challenge. It's worth noting also that actually even inputs were a bit of a challenge, because the ships also from especially the East, India, China, Korea, there was a reduced number of ships sailing. So again, imports were a little bit constrained, some delays in goods, but thankfully I think supply chains opened up pretty quickly. Even after China had closed down and India closed down, we've gone through that rough part for them. But now the challenge is, of course, is what's going to happen next, because to some extent COVID is not gone away. The disease is still with us. It's a new normal. We are learning how to live with it. But I think what we've seen in some countries is, as the case levels rise beyond a certain level, you find that they are tempted to lock down. And then that we go back again.
Go back to where we were again, right. When you talked about the production capacity going down, of course these affected the workforce as well. Could you just give us a picture of how that went down?
Yeah, it's very difficult, I think, for employers in all sectors. And I think, if you think about hospitality, for instance, but we know it was the same for manufacturing. When you have no work and you have staff, you don't know what are we going to do with them. So a lot of what has been done and what had been agreed with a lot of the unions, and we've been working with the unions, FKE and the Ministry of Labor, is to say, let's not lay off people too quickly. How can we take different stages? So the first stage was just ask people to go on leave, because everybody is entitled to leave at some level. So we're like, okay, just take your leave. But now if your leave days end, then we are in a bit of a problem. So the next step was for people going on unpaid leave. So a lot of businesses were sending people on unpaid leave and saying, look, we'll call you back when work comes back. you know, for an employer, you have challenges with your staff. Besides the human connection of the people you work with, and you work with them together like it's a community of some sort. There is also a thing of skills. So one of the challenges is that if you send people home and they go away, and you know, they go far, they go to Busia or Mombasa or wherever, and then you don't have the skills. You have equipment, you've trained people how to use that equipment. They are the ones who know what to do with it. If you don't have them, there is a challenge. But of course the challenge again is we can't have people sitting around or coming to work, which is an expense again, and you're not able to pay them. So there's a responsibility of the employer not to create expenses for their staff, which is just making life harder for them, and they're not going to be able to pay.
Right.
But I think a lot of organizations have figured out how to negotiate, and we've been encouraging our members, have a discussion with the employees so you can figure out what is happening. Of course, there were others also who just reduced pay. That was also one of the steps. We just say, let's, instead of any of us going home, why don't we reduce our pay, and then we'll be able to share the little that we have over this period. Thankfully, I think a lot of industries are picking up again, so they are able to kind of call back employees and keep work going. Of course, there's the ones we'll talk about who have retooled, who have moved and started making sanitizer, started making face masks and other PPE things which are related to COVID, and those have been able to continue surviving.
In fact, let's just dive into that right now. When the pandemic came, somehow it showed the capability of the manufacturing industry in Kenya, because now we had to look inward for the products that we wouldn't even think would be produced in the country. So how did that change, say, the setup of the manufacturing sector?
Yeah, it's changed quite significantly. I think there's Ram Emanuel, who was a former assistant to the president. I think he was the chief of staff to President Obama. And he said, never let a good crisis go to waste. What he said is that you can do things which were thought impossible in that crisis. So for a lot of businesses, they never, you never think you can change what you make or start doing something new. Our automotive sector, for instance, and you hear that it's the automotive sector, came up with a ventilator, with a ventilator for people. So these are people who are making car parts, filters and so on, but they were able to get different players in electronics, say, some computers, some medical people, and able to come up with a ventilator. Actually, last week, we got a KBC certification for that ventilator, so hopefully it can be made now broader, not just for this period. So I think what it teaches us is the point of innovation and the opportunity that we have to create new things, and not just to think about the same things that we've been making all the time. We can think about what's new, what is possible. There are many other businesses that have done the same. I think like making beds, even for the health. There was a lot of reacting towards the health. And that's, so that's been good to see what pool of innovation that we have within ourselves. Obviously, there are things like even, is it digital online sales, which have now grown. People starting to realize that we can actually sell online whatever we were doing before. Anything really, because
food and appliances.
Yes, we can put it up there, and there's been quite a big growth there. So I think there was a lot of adjustment to the new reality to keep us going.
Do you think that this is something that will go on beyond COVID-19?
I hope so, because I think we need to understand that that innovation is going to keep us going. I think, like we said, because we don't know where we are yet with the whole pandemic and what's going to happen next, we do know though that there are new opportunities opening up. We realize that global supply chains might be realigning a little bit, not just because of COVID, but because of also the China-US issues, the trade agreements we are coming up with. There's the Africa CFTA, we have Brexit going on. There are opportunities in there. And so it is a chance and a time for us to start thinking innovatively. What is it that we can do here? Where are those opportunities and those markets that we might be able to manufacture for and get, something into them? But also, I think one of our big challenges is still going to be our productivity at the end of the day, and our ability to compete in these global markets. Yes, it's true, there'll be some strategic realignment, but even as people realign strategically, they might decide we don't want to produce anymore in China. But why will they want to produce in Kenya? We have to make that attractive.
Right.
We have to show that we are very productive. We have to show that we have, clear policy and rules, and the opportunities here to serve the African market, the East African market. So that's part of the work we need to do, make sure that our policy is absolutely geared for what the new future is going to be.
Before the pandemic struck, there were already challenges that the sector was facing. One of them, the biggest that manufacturers always complain about, is high cost of energy.
Yeah.
Right. So as it is right now, what do you think the government should do to ensure that they create a business environment that's favorable really for Kenyan goods?
Yes, it's. I think there are very many difficult questions around the costs of our economy that need to be, reviewed. Obviously, power is one of the big ones, and power is very specific. There are some industries which are very high power consumers, but others consume less. But what tends to happen with the cost of power is that when investors abroad are looking at a country, the first thing they do, they may not come. The first thing is, get me a report. Let me look at what's the population, how educated are they, is there a free exchange of currency. They're just looking overly. And somewhere on that list is the cost of power. So when we don't have a competitive cost of power, people can look at Egypt, they can look at Ethiopia, maybe in coming times in South Africa as well, and just look at who is around us. They can look at that cost of power and say, well, we can get power cheaper there. That becomes a mark that even before they've come here, they've decided it's an expensive country. I think one of the things we need to be looking at is just, again, productivity. I think from a government perspective, and it's the same thing with our power companies. I think if we look at the last stats I heard, is something like 19% of the power that is generated is lost. Okay, so we buy, KPLC buys power, 100 units, but they only bill 81. And they don't know where the rest is, where 19 went. Okay. It could be, I'm told it's partly it's transmission lines, partly it's stolen, illegal connections and all that kind of thing. But that's the kind of productivity where we need to, this is something that needs to be focused on. Because even a 15% reduction in the cost of power would be great for consumers and for manufacturers. So it's this kind of things that we need to make sure that we are running a little bit more smoothly to make our costs come down. Yeah.
As much as no one knows what the future holds,
yes.
Is there a recovery strategy for the sector?
We've gone through that. In the 90s, for instance, when Kenya liberalized, and there was a lot of influx of imported goods and so on, manufacturers had to adjust and become competitive and know their markets. So the key thing for manufacturers is going to be, you need to understand your customers, understand your markets, and start producing towards satisfying their needs. Now, on the other hand, we are saying to government the same thing, that you need to give manufacturers that flexibility and start understanding that the economy is shifting, the global economy is shifting, and the old rules about, for instance, how you tax us and how you charge us, they are no longer the same. If you want these businesses to remain competitive and for manufacturing to grow, the goal is to get it to 15%. We have to now start adjusting our method of engagement, even how we tax, how we grow the economy, what is going to make the economy grow. So for instance, one of the ones we've been having challenges with is like excise taxes. And excise taxes have been going up and up and up, and not just its rate is going up, but also its breadth. We are bringing more and more products into the excise regime. And excise itself is a very, it's a tax on production rather than on revenue or on sales, because you make something, you pay excise. whether you've sold it, whether you sold it for a profit, just by the act of making it is taxed. And that, that is not conducive to business. So we'd rather you should be taxing their profits rather than just the production. Yeah. And you look at other countries, what it tends to do is because you're taxing production in the country, you're not similarly taxing people who import products. So you start encouraging people to import products because it's not taxed.
So it's cheaper to import than to access locally made goods, which is a big problem.
There's a competitiveness which companies here must be competitive. We must organize ourselves and produce at a competitive rate. But then there's now a lack of competitiveness that is introduced by tax or by the tax regime or by not getting your VAT refunds, for instance, because you have to fund all these, quite a lot of cash flow that you have to fund. So if we start removing those things that are making us uncompetitive, that will help the local businesses adjust and be able to be agile within the current circumstances. So in fact, in our toolkit, we had a project with KPMG where we were looking at what is the recovery strategy, very much to your question, what do we need to do? And we came up with a toolkit and said these are some of the things that the areas that government should be looking at that are going to help us go forward. And one of them is, of course, we've talked about policy. We need clear policy. And it's not just clear policy. We're saying it's new policy. It's a new world. Can we relook at our policy on how we're going to encourage industrialization? But then also we say, let's make this policy stable over the long run. It's not just, we tend to make strategy 1 year and then next year we've changed our mind, which is not very good for industry. We need longer term planning because industries it's a big investment. It takes time to invest. It takes time to recoup the investment. And then secondly, we're looking at SMEs and saying that a lot of our manufacturers are actually SMEs. And we need to think about how are we, whatever policy we're coming up with, how do we help SMEs grow? Is it credit that they need? Is it, and on credit, the government I know is working on a guarantee fund. I think the cabinet approved something last week around that, a credit guarantee scheme. But it's training as well, because they need to know, a lot of the time for SMEs, it's not just the money, it's also the ability to use the money, to understand how do you bring in systems, how do you improve your productivity, how do you improve on your quality.
When you look at it like that, you actually think it's not enough to just say buy Kenya, build Kenya. There's a lot around that.
There's a lot around
that.
I think but we like the idea of buy Kenya, build Kenya is good for whatever we are making in Kenya. Yes, and especially our taxes. If it's the government buying with our taxes, they should buy our products. So that is, they should privilege them. But of course, it creates other issues. They should do it when it's competitive. Because just because we make it in Kenya doesn't mean that we should spend, again, it's our taxes. I don't want to know that my taxes are being used to buy Betty's milk, which is 3 times the price of something else. That we could get it 3 times cheaper. Then that it's not useful for the economy. So the question is, how can we get yours to be competitive? That's number one. And a lot of the times, though, for Buy Kenya, Build Kenya, we have a new list of items. You find those things are competitive. Even if we take shoes like gumboots and boots for soldiers, you can buy them here quite competitively. So it's not that may not be the reason that is there. But the other side is about industrializing. Kenya is a biggish market. Okay, it's a sizable market of some sort. But in global terms, it's a very small market. The opportunity for us, if we're going to industrialize, is going to be in exports. And if any country that has industrialized, it is about exports. Unless you're China or the US, where you have a huge internal market of 1 billion plus people, maybe India as well, then you can industrialize locally. But we are what are we now, 50 million?
Yeah, about
47 or something there, yeah. The East African market might be getting us, if you include Ethiopia, maybe we are 200 million or so, 250 million. So there's an opportunity there. to sell to those people. So that's an export opportunity. So as long as if you start making for export and start thinking we are making for the world, then you have a huge opportunity. One of the opportunities, for instance, in Kenya, we have with the US is it's called the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, and things listed there. Currently, we only sell some apparel. That's our main part, and I think some nuts are going through there. But that is a market of, several $1 trillion. If you got, 0.5% of that, whatever you're making, handkerchiefs, just make handkerchiefs and get a bit of that market. It's fantastic, but it's an export market. So we then have to have our mindset to what are we doing for that export market, what's their quality requirement, what are their tariff requirements, how do we open up those markets.
Okay, as we come to a close of this conversation, what would be your closing remarks? What is the way forward now?
Yeah, the way forward. Okay. So I think one is, and like I talked about before, is to think about resilience, is to say that, you know what, it's a tough time, there are difficult times, but there is a way through this. There is a way out. And we need to, if we apply our minds to it, if we think big enough, and if we think radically enough, we can actually transform our industrial market, we can transform our manufacturing, and in effect transform our country in what we do. We are calling for a total rethink of, let's say we're saying we're rethinking what's our industrial policy. How are we going to grow these industries that will make things 15-30% of the economy. Interestingly enough, and COVID gives us this opportunity to rethink, there is no government in Kenya that has not wanted to grow industry since 1963. It's always been there in the plan. But we are where we are. We've grown. I think the number of industries have definitely grown. The absolute value of industry has grown. But we also know we are not industrialized as we dreamed, as we want also for 2030. We are a little bit behind about where we want to go. So this is a time for us to start asking those questions and say, okay, so why are we not, what is holding us back? And then we deal with those issues that are holding us back so that we can be able to move forward. You mentioned some of the things, the cost of power, the policy stability, access to markets. If we start discussing those things and saying let's improve on those, then we should be in a good position to say 2020 was a difficult year, but it was the beginning of something new. That's when we started, that's when we changed and became something new. And that's the hope. And I think we have the opportunity.
Okay. Thank you very much for speaking with us.
All right.
Right. Hope is the message here, that it could be an opportunity, that 2020 was not bad after all. It opened our eyes to ensure that we take advantage of the opportunities that there are in growing the manufacturing industry. There is hope for the growth and prospering of that industry. My name is Betty Kiptum. I have been speaking with Muchai Kunyiha. He is the chairman of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, and we have been talking about the state of the manufacturing sector in Kenya 2020 and what the future is. Well, we move on to other news now. Global merchandise trade volumes fell by 14.3% in the second quarter from the first of 2020 due to COVID-19, with the largest plunges seen in Europe and North America. According to World Trade Organization figures, export and import of merchandise fell by 15% and 13.6% respectively across the globe in the second quarter compared to the previous period. Here are the details of these and other stories in our international business roundup.
Data from 38 economies that account for more than 2/3 of the global trade in services by the WTO showed that in April and May, global trade in services fell by nearly 30% year-on-year. Merchandise trade in Europe and North America shrank the most by 21% and 20% respectively from the previous period, while Asia remained less affected, posting a 7% drop in the volume. The WTO forecast in April that global trade will contract by between 13 and 32% in 2020. However, WTO said the eventual result would largely depend on policy decisions with regard to the control of the COVID-19 pandemic, which are critical in softening the ongoing blow to trade. Meanwhile, major car makers are suing the U.S. government over import taxes it has imposed on Chinese parts. Tesla is the largest auto firm to object to custom duties introduced by the Trump administration and is demanding refunds. The U.S. and China have imposed border taxes on each other's goods and services as part of a trade war. Tensions between the U.S. and China have rapidly escalated in the recent weeks, mainly concerning technology firms. A number of lawsuits are reported to have been filed by car makers in the past few days in the New York-based Court of International Trade. Founder Elon Musk wants the tariffs cancelled along with a refund with interest of import taxes paid, according to the filing. Finally, since the 18th century, the London street Savile Row has been known for its tailoring, but things are a lot quieter than usual this year as the COVID-19 outbreak is keeping people at home. For centuries, the suit has been the go-to outfit for millions of office workers worldwide. However, UK researchers have found that 9 out of 10 people who worked from home recently would like to continue doing so in future. Many of work habits have been transformed by the coronavirus, including what people wear. And even though there may be fewer reasons to don a suit these days, its professional appeal looks likely to endure.
Let's delve into sports now. Reigning 1,500-meter African champion Winnie Chebet will be using her participation at the Doha Diamond League meeting to get in shape ahead of a grueling 2021 season where Olympic Games qualification will be at stake. Meanwhile, world 1,500-meter champion Timothy Cheruiyot is eyeing to run another world-leading time tomorrow. He will be running alongside Ferguson Rotich and Wycliffe Kinyamal.
Chebet will participate in this Friday's final round of the rescheduled Diamond League circuit in Doha as a pacemaker in the 3,000 meters race.
My preparation is not bad. It's very hard. We trained for since December last year. After now, we are ready for that.
Her preparations have, however, been hit by the coronavirus pandemic, with the 29-year-old saying that the return of track action was heartening, despite the strict guidelines that have to be adhered to, saying the nature of training gave one mental edge.
It's very hard, but now I'm just training. You must be trained hard, and you must be disciplined for training. You must be follow what the coach is saying, so that you can get a high for training. So that you can get a medal indoor, you must be followed a lot of rules.
Chebet, who won the 2018 African title in Asaba, is also aiming to return to competitive racing, with Olympic qualification fueling her desire. The 3,000 women's race is set to feature an array of Kenyan tracksters, including 3,000 meter steeplechase world record holder Beatrice Chepkoech, Agnes Tirop, and Ethiopian Gudait Segei. The rescheduled Diamond League circuit comes to a close Friday in Doha.
Now, internationally, Senegalese international Edouard Mendy is set to compete against keeper Ari Zabalaga and Willy Caballero to be Chelsea's first-choice goalkeeper after joining the Blues from Rennes for £22 million for a period of 5 years. This comes less than 24 hours after Chelsea booked a spot in the Carabao Cup fourth round after thrashing Barnsley 6-0 at Stamford Bridge.
The 28-year-old Mendy becomes Chelsea's seventh first-team signing, following the arrivals of Hakim Ziyech, Timo Werner, Ben Chilwell, Thiago Silva, Malang Sarr and Kai Havertz. Mendy kept 9 clean sheets in 24 League One appearances last season with Rennes, helping them to finish third and qualify for the Champions League for the first time in the club's history. Meanwhile, Chelsea qualified for the fourth round of the Carabao Cup following a 6-0 drubbing of Championship side Barnsley. Tammy Abraham opened the scoring for much-changed Chelsea side, and Havertz doubled their lead before the break.
Put away from him. That's a poor touch though, and Abraham's won it back, and Tammy Abraham has his first goal of the season. Take him away from Halma. And here's Havertz, his first Chelsea goal.
Ross Buckley then notched in the third.
Pinched it back after great work from Havertz and swept it in for 3-0. And that might be good night.
Before Havertz added 2 more.
Abraham wants it in the middle. It's a lovely touch for Havertz. On target again. Great ball round the corner from Abraham for Havertz. Collins has made a mess of it. Havertz is going to walk it in for his hat-trick.
With Olivier Giroud wrapping up the win.
The substitute, great ball in. Olivier Giroud pays it the compliment it deserved. And he's happy.
Meanwhile, Everton will host West Ham United at the Goodison Park in the 4th round following their 5-2 victory away to Fleetwood Town.
Here's Bernard. He dinks one in. Richarlison! Everton in front. Richarlison onto his right boots, trying to shape to shoot. Uses Iwobi, gets it back and puts Everton 2 up superbly. Great link-up play between Iwobi and Richarlison, and what a finish it was. Gets to the dead ball line, Richarlison, and Everton have their 2-goal advantage back. Alex Iwobi, created by Anthony Gordon. There's the cutback, falls here for a brilliant strike from Bernard, and that should seal it, surely. 5-2 for the 2nd game in a row, as far as Everton are concerned. Job done.
The final 3rd round matches will be played tonight. Bristol City locks horns with Aston Villa, Lincoln City face Liverpool, and Manchester City take on Bournemouth.
Well, that is the end of Channel 1 Business Insight. Many thanks for watching. Sami Kigen on Facebook, you say you have enjoyed the interview on manufacturing. Thank you very much for watching. Now, the United Nations General Assembly is ongoing, and President Uhuru Kenyatta addressed that particular General Assembly. His speech will be coming up just after the weather update by Irene Muchuma Odem. Thank you for watching. My name is Betty Kiptum. Lensa Odingo has been my colleague on the sign language interpretation. Good night.
Well, hello there. Many thanks for keeping it Channel 1. My name is Yusuf Farah. This is the Channel 1 weather updates. Now, tonight, there will be rainfall in the central highlands of our country and the same in the western region. However, for the rest of our country, there will be dry weather conditions. Kericho is the coldest tonight, temperature standing at as low as 10 degrees Celsius. In the morning, this is how things will be looking in our country. Sunny intervals dominate most parts of the country, from the northeastern region, Garissa, Mandera and Isiolo, all the way to the coastal region. For residents of Mombasa and Kilifi, if you are planning to go by your business in the morning, carry an umbrella with you because there will be showers with sunny intervals. However, for residents of Lamu, you can go for a morning walk by the beach or even a swim because the weather is good for that. For residents of the Lake Turkana region and its environs, it will be cloudy with sunny intervals. In the afternoon, sunny intervals continue to prevail in most parts of the country. For residents of the coastal region, Mombasa, Kwale, Kilifi and Lamu, you can go for a walk by the beach or a swim because the weather is good for that. Kericho, Kisumu and its environs, carry an umbrella with you in the afternoon tomorrow because there will be rain accompanied with thunderstorms rather. Now, as far as the temperatures are concerned in the country, Mandera highs of 36 and lows of 24, Kisumu highs of 28 and lows of 19, and here in the country's capital, Nairobi, highs of 25 and lows of 15. I leave you with the international weather forecast. Remember, stay safe, stay warm, and have a lovely night.
President of the 75th session of the UN General Assembly, Your Excellency Volkan Bozkır, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Excellency Antonio Guterres, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I'm indeed delighted to participate in this 75th session of the United Nations General Assembly. Despite the unusual circumstances that we meet, circumstances created by the COVID-19 pandemic. Let me take this opportunity, Mr. President, to thank you and to congratulate you on your election, and I wish you a productive and successful 75th session and assure you of Kenya's full as well as constructive support. I'd also like to take this opportunity to congratulate your predecessor, His Excellency Professor Tijani Mohamed Bandai, for ably steering the 74th session of the General Assembly during this very, very difficult season. He ensured that notwithstanding the difficulties of the pandemic, the work of the United Nations continued. Mr. President, the 75th anniversary is a moment to reflect on the journey that we have taken. It is a moment to introspect, to establish if the anchor still holds or if our community of nations has become unanchored by the challenges of our time. This is an occasion to reflect on our world and its institutions. Have our relations and institutions been refined by experience and the passage of time, or have our institutions become battered and left not fit for purpose? At 75, the United Nations is older than most of its member states, and more importantly, older than over 96% of our global population. A clear majority of the global population today cannot relate to the circumstances of its founding. Yes, the United Nations in its birth brought rules and hope for a world in ruins. That was 7.5 decades ago. But what does it bring to the world today? 75 years ago, delegates from 50 nations who had endured immense disruption and suffering seized the opportunity to chart a bold new course for mankind. They were determined to save future generations from the scourge of war, and in so doing, they gifted us a timeless charter that has remained our shared framework of international cooperation. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, on this occasion of the 75th anniversary of the founding of the United Nations, we, the people of the United Nations, must rekindle the idealism, will, and spirit of the San Francisco Conference that founded our great organization. Today, mankind is confronted by complex, multifaceted, and gravely serious challenges. Across the world, we are witnessing constant disruptions that are generating great anxiety, uncertainty, and unpredictability. The COVID-19 pandemic best defines the challenges of our time. A challenge that affects us all, a challenge that we can only overcome if each one of us succeeds. The COVID-19 pandemic and other contemporary challenges, including the climate and biodiversity crisis that we face, our growing geostrategic tensions, social as well as economic inequalities, the crisis of legitimacy and governance, as well as vulnerabilities of our digital world, have indeed redefined the imperative for multilateral action. Kenya believes strongly that if we remain anchored in multilateralism and with unity of purpose, if we are much more agile in embracing change and positive transformations, if we remain rooted in a rule-based international system and act innovatively and selflessly, we can transcend our challenges and secure lasting peace and prosperity for all. This firm persuasion is born of our own experience and evolution as a nation. Much like the United Nations, our country was founded on the ideals of liberty, unity, rule of law, democracy, and participation of the people, grounded on human dignity, equity, social justice, inclusiveness, equality, human rights, and good governance. I believe these are all shared global values. And Kenya acknowledges that we've had our challenges in meeting these, but that doesn't change the vision that we have for the future. We have worked, all these issues have worked for us in our domestic context, and I believe that they will serve the United Nations well. And we are confident that our community of nations can do far much more collectively than any one country can ever do alone. Your Excellencies, the theme of our 75th Assembly, namely, the future that we want, the United Nations that we need, reaffirming our collective commitment to multilateralism, is most appropriate and indeed timely. It speaks not only to the urgent need to review our actions at both national and global levels, but also responds to the pressing demand for effective multilateral action within a rule-based international system. Indeed, the COVID-19 pandemic should give fresh impetus to our collective efforts to strengthen international cooperation. This global pandemic has deepened, unfortunately, existing inequalities, hitting the poorest and most vulnerable communities the hardest. It has created an unprecedented synergy of challenges and demonstrated the limits of our institutions. There is therefore an urgent need to improve readiness in the area of global crisis management, but more importantly, to effectively take urgent, coordinated, and collective measures to build resilience that would insulate our societies and our economies against the adverse effects of such pandemic and crisis. Mr. President, in Kenya, we have had to undertake special and targeted efforts. A national multi-agency team on COVID-19 is in place to ensure such appropriate interventions. We have revamped and expanded our national and county healthcare systems. The interventions that we have taken have targeted the old and the vulnerable, the unemployed, and our youth, and specific programs to keep them healthy and productively engaged. We have also recognized how this pandemic has in itself produced the challenges of gender inequality and more so gender violence. We have introduced financial and tax interventions to keep the economy and businesses viable and solvent. And like everyone else, introduced social health measures, including cessation of travel, social distancing, the wearing of masks, and improving hygiene for all. And this has been achieved to the best of our abilities within an environment of constitutional civil liberties and rights to prosperity and development of all our citizenry. At the continental level, Mr. President, working with the African Union, I have been involved personally in guiding collective continental actions together with my fellow heads of state and government who are members of the African Union Bureau. We adopted a continental COVID-19 mitigation strategy, which has had great success in coordinating continental efforts to prevent severe illness and death from COVID-19, as well as minimizing social and economic disruptions. Your Excellencies, what we have learned in the last 6 months is that no country, and I repeat again, no country can manage a crisis of this magnitude on its own. We have had to work collectively in order to build back better. We therefore call upon the global community to enhance cooperation and assistance to developing countries in vulnerable situations so as to bolster their economies and healthcare systems and to achieve universal healthcare coverage as envisioned in the 2019 UHC political declaration. Mr. President, this assembly is the pinnacle platform for debate on matters of global political concern. At no time in our recent history have global developments been as concerning as they are today. Global geopolitics and competition between global powers have complicated and severely undermined the global response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Indeed, they have caused severe anxiety and undermined coordinated responses to an economic and social character that would have left us in a stronger position as a global collective. Your Excellencies, as the President in Office of the Organization of African, Pacific, and Caribbean States, an organization comprising 97 countries, some of whom are the most vulnerable and poorest, I have become acutely aware of global geopolitics and competition that is not focused on helping us better build a stronger, safer, healthier, and more prosperous world. What is equally important is that even after addressing the acute phase of the pandemic, we must all remain collectively committed to global recovery. Developing countries seeking to have the existing debt moratorium refined and extended to December 2021, and an early replenishment of the IMF Poverty Reduction and Growth Trust and the World Bank International Development Association, as well as an early decision on the special drawing rights. But Your Excellencies, I am confident that we have the answers to the challenges we face. The SDGs are a model for multilateral action, which capture the common aspirations of mankind to end poverty, protect our planet's biosphere, and to ensure prosperity for all. The challenges that confront us today only serve to underscore the need to reaffirm our commitment to the implementation of the SDGs, particularly with regard to fighting poverty and inequality, but also our shared responsibility to effectively contribute to this common vision. Mr. President, turning to climate change, I believe Kenya's stance on climate change and the environment is known to all. Climate change can unpackage our efforts to attain the SDGs. Kenya acknowledges the disproportionate impacts of climate variability in small island developing states, as well as states with fragile ecological environments. In this regard, Kenya was honored to co-host the United Nations Secretary General's Climate Action Summit in September of last year, which resulted in landmark commitments as well as initiatives. Similarly, the interdependent crisis of the biodiversity loss and ecosystem degradation requires urgent and collective action. Our global home that was teeming with millions of species of God-given creatures, both great and small, is slowly dying. Kenya once again calls for urgent collective action to halt the dissemination of our biodiversity. We must find a global balance between human beings and other creatures on our earth. We must put harmony between people and nature. Our world is yearning for us to stop its ruin. In this regard, we in Kenya look forward to the upcoming Biodiversity Summit that shall be held later. Ladies and gentlemen, as host to the United Nations Environmental Programme and the UN Habitat, of which we are proud, Kenya calls for the expansion of the two programs, their viability to harmonize and to domicile all environmental and human settlement issues in their rightful place, which is at their headquarters. Kenya remains committed to continue offering the global community a conducive environment to declare the mandate of these two important UN organizations, UNEP and UN Habitat. Let me also remind all of us, Mr. President, that Kenya and Portugal will co-host the second UN Oceans Conference in the second quarter of 2021. We welcome you all to participate at the highest levels in Lisbon as we strive to harness science and innovation to scale up our conservation and the sustainable use of our oceans and blue economy. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me pause at this moment to sincerely thank each and every one of you for electing Kenya to the Security Council for the 2021-2022 term. The vote was an overwhelming affirmation of the trust and confidence that many members have in Kenya. I wish to assure you that Kenya will deliver on our commitments to the Council under the mandate of the African Union. We will work closely with all member states to ensure that the Council discharges its mandate in an inclusive, responsive, and consultative manner, because peace is a collective effort. Mr. President, Kenya has been a frontline state in global efforts to confront terrorism and violent extremism. We have consistently advocated for the need to build partnerships for a strategic and operational approach to prevent and to combat violent extremism, not just here in Kenya or our region, but globally. And even as we struggle with all other challenges of development and cooperation, we cannot afford to take our eyes over the ever-present danger of the existential threat of terrorism. Kenya was honored to have hosted the first ever African Regional High-Level Conference on Counterterrorism and Prevention of Violent Extremism in July of last year. Kenya also welcomes the envisioned establishment of the UN Counterterrorism Program Office here in Nairobi. As a country that has long contributed to global peacekeeping operations, it has been our experience that cooperation amongst various stakeholders, a clarity of mandate, appropriate training and equipping of troops, an integration of conflict prevention, peacekeeping, and peace-building measures, the participation especially of women, as well as the periodic reviews of the effectiveness of missions, greatly strengthens peacekeeping operations. Kenya will continue to advocate for inclusive, meaningful, triangular consultations between the Security Council, the UN Secretariat, and troop and police contributing countries. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, even though the world has made great progress since the creation of this great body, the United Nations, 75 years ago, our present challenges may appear dispiriting and the journey ahead seem daunting and arduous. But existence is like a marathon of global proportions. I come from a country of marathoners, and I therefore appreciate the demands of endurance, teamwork, and persistence in conquering the road ahead. Together, I believe we can win this race. Mankind can triumph and secure peace and prosperity in a greater biodiversity for present and future generations. Finally, Mr. President, the Secretary General's recent appeal for a global ceasefire also includes a humanitarian call for the rollback of international sanctions and to reinforce the efforts of vulnerable, fragile, and conflict-afflicted countries to deal with the impact of COVID-19. I state today that Kenya stands behind this initiative. And in this connection, I wish to make a special appeal for an end to the economic and commercial, as well as financial embargo against Cuba, sanctions against Zimbabwe and Sudan. The United Nations provides us a platform to resolve age-old differences and unburden ourselves of these antiquated conflicts. It is also Kenya's desire to see at this critical and historical juncture an inspiration for peace between Palestine and Israel. Kenya calls for renewed and genuine international efforts to find a just and lasting solution to the conflict based on the existence of two states, the State of Israel and the State of Palestine, within the framework of the relevant United Nations pronouncements. I want to thank all of you for your attention. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Vera Beauty College.
Vera Beauty and Fashion College, with branches in Nairobi, Eldoret, Thika, and Meru. Did you know that we are a TVET-approved institution? We offer courses in fashion design, interior design in soft furnishing, event decoration, flower arrangement,